Yeah, let's do it, man.
Woo! Oh, man, I bumped my desk right as we start. Good job, me. For Subspace 14. Hi, this is We Were Gamers, a podcast today about Star Trek. This is our sub-pod. What do we call this thing? JJ?
The name is so good, and you never remember it. It's the Subspace Transmissions.
Subspace Transmissions. This episode features a subspace transmission or 5.
Several, yes.
And I love, I love how they act out the computer stuff in this one, where they're talking over subspace. Like, Odo just sort of looks off screen, and then the screen goes blank.
Mm-hmm.
There's like there's no interaction with the computer or anything. You know, like how on your phone people can see you hanging up FaceTime or something.
Yeah.
It's kind of awesome. That's getting ahead of ourselves. Hello, welcome. This is our monthly sub pod about Star Trek. JJ and I love Star Trek. We love talking about Star Trek. What else can we love about Star Trek other than talking about Star Trek?
I mean, watching it.
Yeah.
Talking about it. Watching it again, even though we've already seen it before.
Yeah.
So we figured we'd talk about it some more.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to do that. But
yeah.
I think before we jump into what we have planned for this episode in particular, we got a little sad news up at the top here.
Yeah. We were thinking about which episodes to do next, and as that happened, within days of each other this past month, the actor who played Odo in DS9, Rene Auberjonois, I believe is how you say his name. I might get it wrong, and if you want to correct me, please do that. I would like to know for sure. Passed away. And also within the same, I think it was the same week, the first female writer for Star Trek. She worked on the original series. Her name was DC Fontana. She worked all the way through Deep Space Nine. So that's a pretty long Star Trek career, if you ask me.
It's a pretty long career in general. I mean, The original series was on in the 60s, right? So
Yeah, and this was on in the 90s. So, I think she was only 80 when she passed. So, I mean, she must have been extremely young to be writing Star Trek, which is pretty amazing. And also earlier in September of this year, 2019, Aron Eisenberg, who played Nog, passed away. He was really young. I think he was only 50.
Yeah, I don't remember reading what it was at the time, but it was unexpected, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's a health thing.
Yeah. Man, so we decided, kind of in honor, in memory, etc., that we were going to pick an episode of DS9 because that encompassed all 3 of these people and one that Miss Fontana had written. And so we ended up picking the episode from season 1 called Dax, which is the 8th episode if you want to pause the podcast and go watch it.
Yeah, so if you're watching on Netflix, know that Netflix does a thing and combines the first 2 episodes into one episode.
Oh, so it's the 7th episode?
When they were originally shown as 2 separate entries, like a part 1 and a part 2.
Okay.
Which is fine, but it means that, Dax is 7th. Anyway, the number of the episode is 1-8. It is the 8th episode of the season, even though it may be the 7th episode in your entry. The name is Dax. That's all. So It's just to be clear what is happening here. We didn't get the number. We didn't get the numbering wrong. They did.
And if you can't tell, it's going to be a Dax-centric episode. And you know what? There was a lot of Odo, which I was very happy with.
Yeah, and actually, we did a bad job because I don't know that Nog is in this episode
is not
at all.
He didn't join.
He was in some of the earlier episodes.
No. He doesn't join until...
Dude, he's in some of the earlier episodes.
Oh, okay.
of the season. I was just going to say, don't tell me because I saw him.
All right.
But he's a super bit part. In like one of the like early episodes where O'Brien's wife is trying to open a school on board.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I don't remember him being a thing until like season 5 or 6 when he kind of takes over as, I think he tries to join Starfleet in season 5.
Yes, he does. I don't remember which season, but he does eventually try to join, and then he does join later.
Right. Yeah. Maybe might be as early as season 4 that he tries. But the glimpse into the Ferengi life, I think, starts very subtly season 1, 2, and 3, and then it really takes into stride season 4 when Nog wants to break from the Ferengi and become a Starfleet officer, and that's like anathema
to the Ferengi way, for sure.
Yeah, like just psychology. Anyway, unfortunately, that's probably the last time we'll talk about Nog this episode, because he does not feature prominently. Neither does Quark, really. So it's not really a Ferengi. I mean,
Quark
he's
is in every episode, but yeah, it's like a kind of a bit part for him.
Yeah. So maybe a little recap of where we're at, since this is a little bit into season 1. We've got most of our main characters have been introduced, right? We've got Dr. Bashir, Kira Nerys, Captain Sisko, Dax. We don't have any Worf yet.
Jadzia Dax.
Jadzia Dax, I apologize. Yes, not Curzon Dax.
Or the other Dax that shows up later.
Ezra Dax, right?
Elsie Dax?
No, Ezra Dax.
Is it Ezra? Okay.
I think it's Ezra Dax.
Anyway. Not that one either.
Ezri Dax.
Esri. Okay.
Esri Dax.
Anyway.
Did you say
not
Elsie?
That one.
So we combined the two.
Yeah.
Nice job.
We got close.
We got there. Worf's not on the show. Chief O'Brien isn't.
Yes, he is. Chief O'Brien is here. Absolutely.
No, but he's not in this episode.
Oh, yeah, he's not in this episode, right?
So he had gone to Earth to, quote unquote, help with his mother-in-law's 100th birthday.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, right? There are a lot of 100-year-olds in this show. This particular episode of this show.
Yeah, we're going to talk about another 100-year-old who I have good opinions about. So
really,
yeah.
All right.
As we go on.
Okay. Where are we at in this season so far? Roughly, people, are we still getting to know? You watched a couple episodes previous to this one, where I maybe recapped myself mentally and then just watched the one.
So the series is it's only being the 8th episode of like a 20 whatever episode season. You're still kind of getting to know the characters. You're learning about everyone. This is kind of the let's learn about Dax episode.
Right. Because we get the recap. We know from when Jadzia joins the station, okay, this is physically what she is, but we don't really know who she is yet.
Right. And she's a Trill, and Trills have this part human, part symbiote thing. And that's kind of all. We have known at this point that at least she and Sisko have some history. Specifically, the symbiote and Sisko have some history. That she has. This is like a new sort of thing for him. He knew the symbiote before it changed hosts.
The symbiote's name previous to this was Curzon Dax, which was
right.
So Dax is the last name because that's the symbiote's name, right?
Right.
So.
And what the symbiote is versus what the person is and stuff we'll kind of get into as a course of this episode.
Right. It sounds basically like Curzon Dax was Sisko's immediate superior for a while as well.
Yeah, or like a mentor at least, right?
At least, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's a space station, there's a wormhole at this point. That the space station is there defending it, kind of.
They've kind of gotten into the geopolitics of Bajor versus Cardassia in the early episodes of why Starfleet is managing this station.
Exactly. Also that, the Bajoran government kind of wants Starfleet there, but also kind of doesn't. That the station is falling apart. That, it's definitely a contentious relationship between kind of all of the parties involved in this area.
Mm-hmm.
We know that Odo is he calls himself yeah, you know he's a changeling for sure. You also know that he's like he calls himself the constable, I think, even at this point, but he's not a Starfleet officer. You know, he doesn't have like a commission or whatever, but he's like the guy who is the cop that walks the beat on the like living portions of the station. It's not clear if he runs security the way you think of like Starfleet security officers, but I think he's kind of that role at the moment.
It seemed like it was kind of split between Nerys and Odo at the beginning, and now in this episode and later, it just is like, no, Odo's in charge of that.
Yeah, and Kira is basically like the first officer to Sisko, even though Sisko is in charge of the station, but in some ways, Kira is in charge of the station. So it's like she's the like Bajoran government's attaché to the Starfleet station.
Yeah, making sure Bajor's interests are protected, right? With whatever happens at the station.
So like that's kind of everyone. O'Brien had an episode earlier in this series, in this season, that was about like O'Brien making friends with people and doing some engineering stuff. But that's kind of past now, and so this is kind of the like let's get to know Jadzia Dax episode. And you know I mean we could just kind of get into it here.
Yeah.
You can see the start is Jadzia and Julian Bashir having coffee.
Oh, I was cringe. Ractigino, thank you, not coffee.
Klingon coffee.
Yeah, Ractigino.
Okay. Anyway, you already knew at this point that Julian kind of had a thing for her.
Man, I didn't remember it. I was cringing a little bit here. I didn't remember him being so skeezy early on.
He's definitely like my notes even say like Julian is such a hound dog.
I mean, it goes a little beyond that, right? Like she says good night. Oh, can I walk you home? No, I'm good. You cannot walk me home. And then he's just like, well, I could just follow her.
Yeah.
Not great.
I bet at the end of the day he wishes he hadn't. Based on what happens here next.
Right, yeah.
So, you know, whatever this is just like a little slice of life here as they lead into the actual story where some alien dudes come in and beat the crap out of them.
Beat the tar out of both of them and then try to abscond with Jadzia. Right. And then we take a break for the opening. So, because I want to talk about the opening for a second.
All right, yeah. So the Jadzia is knocked out. Bashir is unconscious on the ground. They throw her comm badge down and drag her away. And that's then the opening starts.
That's the cold open, right? And then do you think they could get away with an opening like this nowadays?
No, of course not.
This is like 3 minutes of very slow pan shots on a space station.
Great music, though.
I mean, I love it more than I thought I did in the past because it tells you everything you need to know about the show. It's about a space station and a wormhole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see the wormhole in it.
But, you know, we like that
like
Discovery
a slow-moving
opening,
astrod.
right? The Discovery opening is good. But this is just such a different thing. And I love it.
So I think the thing that makes this opening work is that not only is it like a bunch of slow pans and stuff, but it's also kind of like introducing you to the setting, right? It's like, oh, hey, here's where this is. There's this wormhole. There's this space station. Hey, there's Bajor in the corner. That's kind of the setting of the whole series, really.
And it just gives you the idea that this place, TNG and Voyager are out there, right, at the same time as this, and they've got ships zooming all over the screen and like lots of planets and asteroids and warp and all that.
TNG has a lot less kinetic movement in their opening than I think you think.
Okay, well,
but like there is like an asteroid, yeah, and you definitely get like the ship jumping to warp and stuff, like big pictures of the ship. But
this is just the space station, and it's alone, and it's just floating there, not doing anything. It just has that feeling of like, yeah, they're just out here, man. You know?
Mm-hmm.
That's
I
pretty
think
great.
if you did this show now, you would have to redo the opening in a more like stylized way, I think.
Oh, I'm sure the DS9 would explode apart into its like blueprints or something.
Or like it would zoom in through the walls and you would see like the promenade, and then it would zoom through there and you would see ops, and you would zoom down and see like a shuttle and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So not that it couldn't be done, but yeah, it would have to be done differently these days. You certainly couldn't get away with this thing now.
Pretty great.
Not that it's bad. Yeah, like I said, it's just different. It was of a certain time.
Certainly was. All right, let's get back into this episode.
So we learn that these people are dragging Jadzia away, and Julian wakes up after having gotten his head beat, and immediately radios to Cisco and is like, "Hey, there are bad guys taking our people away.
Hey, they have Jadzia. Find Jadzia, computer. She's in this corridor. No, that's where I'm at."
Yeah, it's like, no, they have her comm badge.
Yeah,
and you find out that the aliens are pretty good at evading the security.
Nerys is super quick, by the way. I'd like to point out she is very intuitive. They're like talking about who could possibly be trying to get her and get her away from her. Hey, I bet they plan to escape the station. If they plan to escape the station, they need to have a ship that's faster than our ships so they can get away. Find the ships that are faster than our ships and shut them down. I was like, whoa, that's some quick thinking.
She is, if nothing else, a very intuitive and jump to conclusions type person.
That's a loaded comment.
Uh-huh. She also seems to assume somehow that they must be working with the Cardassians pretty quick, which again is also in her character to assume everyone is working with the Cardassians.
She ain't wrong.
That part isn't actually ever proven, I don't think. They definitely don't agree that that's true.
Cisco basically proves it, right? In a second here, when basically, what's his name? I can't remember his name, but
they say it, but it's not important.
They're trying to extradite Jadzia, right, from the Federation, because the Federation has an extradition treaty with this planet that they're from, which is, I guess, not part of the Federation. They would have to be, right, because they have the death penalty. And the Federation does not.
Federation. Yeah. So it is right. These people here are like fugitive hunters or something, and Dax apparently has some kind of warrant out for her arrest in whatever this system is related to something that happened there. And
Cisco basically lays it out and says, you must have gotten help from the Cardassians to be able to shut down the shields. Your planet...
He does some stuff with the security sensors and stuff while they're trying to run away, and also disables some force fields in order to get into their ship.
Well, your planet and the Cardassians get along, so you must have gotten help from them, and that's why you didn't want to present us with your warrant, because we would say no.
Right. Like, why didn't you just come to us directly?
Yeah.
Right.
And they kind of work it out that, hey, this is a Bajoran station. Maybe we can hold off the extradition of our Starfleet lieutenant based on that technicality.
Right. So my note says, like, these guys are really bad at serving warrants, but like, not only are they really bad at it, they're trying to grab the person and get off the station, because they know while it is a Starfleet administered station, it's technically run or owned by Bajor after the Cardassians left, which then means their government needs to have a treaty with Bajor, which they do not.
Right.
And so that's why they were trying to grab her and just leave so that they could, they were very interested in just getting out of there. Right? Give us your person. We're leaving now. Like, everything's fine here. Look at this official warrant. Very official. Definitely don't look into this. We're going now. Okay, goodbye. And then Cisco's like, let's just pump the brakes.
Well, and then we get one of the things that becomes a classic over the next 6 or 7 seasons of Cisco and his gotcha grin. When he finally figures it out and says, yeah, we're going to have like an extradition hearing with Bajor. And then he just smiles at the guy, and you're like, there it is. There's the
Yeah.
Cisco grin. I love it. So
He's
good.
he's like, see you in the hearing, you know?
Yeah. And then we enter Starfleet Captain Lawyer mode after that, which is pretty great too.
Well, hold on. Now Odo they got to find a place to have the hearing. They don't even have a place.
Oh yeah, that's right. We got to talk about that.
And you get the a scene that becomes a running thing throughout this show.
Is this the first time it happens?
I can't say because there were a couple episodes before this I didn't watch.
I think it is. It feels like the first time that it's happened.
Odo using leverage on Quark to do something that they want. It's not the first time Quark has been leveraged in this way, because they also do this to him in like the very first episode to keep him from leaving the station.
Oh, right. Fair enough.
Like they blackmail him into staying. And Odo then basically blackmails Quark into closing his bar so they can set up and have this little trial or hearing or whatever.
I like that on the space station, the only open space is Quark's bar.
I know, right? There's no other like area to have an open thing. It could have in a cargo bay. No.
This is
cargo is important.
This is where you get a little bit of movie magic, and you realize it's season 1. They don't have a lot of sets yet.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like they didn't think about like, oh dang, we didn't build a cargo bay. Like
having been on the Deep Space Nine set, it's a lot smaller than you'd think in terms of the filmable area that they had.
Yeah, I bet it's like a hallway.
It's a curved hallway. Yeah, a couple curved hallways.
You get Quark's bar. You get that one round set for ops.
Yep. And they,
later they must have a cargo bay or something later, because I remember those showing up.
Later in the show, they had to delete some sets so they could make the Defiant.
Oh, sure. Right. Yeah.
Yep. So it was a very tight production.
I believe it. So I just love the way Odo handles it. And he's like, I'm just the one administering the Bajoran building codes here. Unfortunately, we are going to have to take down all of these. This bar is too close to the door. It'll have to be moved.
Yeah, your hollow suites will not be operable once we move the walls in.
Just the second floor ones, all of them are going to have to go because of this wall.
Yeah.
And Quark is like, you're blackmailing me. And Odo's like, it's just business. Which, of course, the Ferengi said to him earlier.
Right.
So anyway, they get Quark to agree to use their bar.
Then Odo gets jammed up by Cisco when he says, hey, man, you got to do me a solid. I'm going to stall this thing, and you got to go to Klystron, I believe is the name of it.
Yeah, Klystron 4.
And figure out what this actual deal is, because this guy seems shady and like he's trying to pull a fast one on us. Which he kind of is. He kind of is, man. I mean,
he does. He's doing what he believes to be true, right?
What's that?
He's doing what he believes to be true because he doesn't know the whole facts.
Yeah, so like it's kind of he's making a decision sans physical evidence, right? Like it's a deduction technique. Oh, well, if I know that these 4 options don't exist, the 5th option must be true. And while Occam's razor kind of works, maybe you can't extradite and execute people based on it.
Well, apparently in Klystron, this is all good.
Okay.
Even though, I mean, so we'll get into it when we start talking about the case here.
Sure.
But it was weird to me that they're like, oh, this only became public recently. It was unsealed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that he's been wanted for 30 years, but now all of a sudden he's wanted? Like, what what?
Well, the mother says that he's obsessed with his father because he never knew him. And like, this seems like the way he's trying to connect with his father is to find out who murdered him, which he will never find out.
Well, yeah. We'll get to what actually happens when we get to the end here. But the case as it's kind of set up is this guy's father was a general on this world during their revolution or something, and he was in a convoy and was killed, and
it was in the civil war they were having, the rebels versus this general's army, which is the main army, I believe.
Right, the government's army. The
government's army, and the Starfleet was helping the government get through it somehow.
Right.
And so Curzon Dax, not Jadzia Dax, was on the planet and, by all accounts, very good friends with this general.
Right, and he was advising him and also, sort of lending Starfleet's diplomatic help or whatever. And the story comes out that there was a transmission just before the general left with the locations of where he was going to be. And the general then is killed by the rebels, and the populace is so inflamed and mad about their beloved general being killed that they win the war, and the general becomes a hero.
They have statues of him everywhere, Odo says.
Yes. The wife becomes the widowed, the long-suffering widow of the hero, and the general becomes a mythological figure almost. And so, that is the case that is left out. There were only so many people that had access to that information, the Sun says, and all of them have alibis for where they were, except for Curzon Dax.
And Curzon is gone. But Jadzia, he, in his opinion, knows, I guess, and therefore is responsible for this, in his opinion, murder.
I think if he could just arrest the symbiote, he would have done that.
I guess. I mean, by the end of it.
But that's not possible.
By the end of it. I definitely think at the beginning, he's willing to take the technicality of getting the symbiote by the end. But at the beginning, it's kind of like, nah, you can't just, change bodies and then not be liable for murder.
I mean, it's a pretty interesting philosophical question, right?
Yeah, sure.
In a case like this, and the Sisko raises the point almost immediately in the hearing, that, hey, this is a different person, right? The Trill symbiote has now joined with a new human. It's a different person. You can't arrest someone for a crime that someone else committed. Curzon Dax is dead. We're sorry. That guy clearly did whatever you say he did, but he's gone. This new person, Jadzia Dax, you can't arrest them for that.
Yeah, and the Klystron 4 man, I can't remember his name, honestly, makes the point, hey, Dr. Bashir, are they two separate brains or one brain? Well, they work together. Yeah, but are there two separate brains? Yes, there are two separate brains. Do they have separate brainwaves? Yeah. Are they the same as when, so they both, I mean, this is kind of, by the end of it, it's the most Star Trek way, right? There's no decision, but it's very, very Star Trek, and why I kind of by the end, about halfway through this episode, I was worried that we didn't pick a great one. But by the end, it's a very classic, the two sides of an argument in a Star Trek always know that they're 100% right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then Star Trek doesn't tell you one of them is wrong.
They're
saved. They're always saved from making a decision, really. I mean...
Or no.
They make a strong argument.
Maybe a decision is made, but then you'll come back and hear that, it's unfortunate that it went this way, but this is how it is sometimes.
Sure, sometimes that happens, right? Yeah. That's more of a TNG thing, where Picard has to say...
He's mediating stuff.
I mediated a decision that I didn't love at the end of, or whatever. But in this instance, by the end of it, something else saves the day, and we're left to wonder. What? So, the trial is very simple, and but the talking about the trial is hard. So,
well, I want to start.
Maybe we should finish the trial, and then we could talk about the implications of what it means. Maybe.
Yeah, I just want to start that the arbiter here, this old lady,
right? Yes,
is great.
She's wonderful. This is the 100-year-old that you wanted to talk about, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Get in it.
At the very start of the trial, they set up in the bar or whatever, and they're here. She comes in and has a little ball as a gavel or something,
which is a very Klingon thing, I think.
It is kind of, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, look, this is going to be informal. I don't want to hear about your fancy words or whatever. Also, I'm 100 years old. I want to be here till supper, not until I go senile. She's like, capiche? Like you guys understand what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
And then like the guy's like, Madam Arbiter, she's like, all right, cut it off like immediately to this guy. And he's like, okay, here's my point. And she's like, thank you. All right, next. And it's just like moving everyone along. She's like, let's get to dinner. Come on. I want to go play bingo. Like that's the implication.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that she takes like hour-long breaks when she says we need a break because people are getting too hot-headed. She goes, bang, 2-hour break. And I was like, I was expecting her to hit the thing and go like, 6 minutes.
I know, right? She's definitely and so then like in their first adjournment or whatever, where they take a break for the day, she comes up and is like, Captain, I really wish you hadn't asked that question. This is gonna make this really complicated.
Oh yeah.
Thanks.
when he says, are you the same person as the other person? She's just like, why couldn't you just dispute the facts?
Yeah, I know, right? And so, like, instead of like disputing the facts of the case, he's asking the metaphysical question of like, what is a Trill and what is a person? And she's like, damn it, now I have to rule on this.
And
right?
he has
because he doesn't have any of the facts. Right?
Jadzia will not open up about what's going on.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing, right? Jadzia is not defending herself and won't
tell even Cisco what
happened. Yeah, she knows the facts, and it's clear that she knows whatever has happened, but is willing to just go with these people if that's what they want.
Yep. So
and
the
Cisco
trial
is the one here dragging this out and refusing to let Dax go.
The trial progresses along those kind of lines of making the argument on whether or not Jadzia and Curzon Dax are the same person. Odo is on Clystron 4 and kind of is working through a mystery of, hey,
what actually happened
This
here?
doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't seem like Curzon is at fault for anything. Also, there's a lot of messages between Curzon and the wife.
And a lot of
they literally say the wife.
Right. And it's also a lot of like, everyone says Curzon and that general were great friends.
Right.
They hung out together. They went drinking all the time. They were seen in public as like hugging and being friends all the time. So why would he murder him? Right.
Right.
It makes no sense. And then Odo proposes, they got all these messages with the wife. Maybe, he was jealous of his wife or something. That's a thing. Odo being the ever, kind of the role he plays in this series all the time is kind of like the justice at any cost, regardless of lives hurt or people damaged.
I love it. I love that you brought that up because I wrote down my favorite line from this show is like, he goes back to talk to the general's wife a second time and says, hey, I've kind of figured out that you're having an affair with Curzon Dax.
The first time he talks with her, she just basically acts super shady and is like, my husband, it was sad and terrible, but also this is what happened and it's sad. And Odo's just like, So
the second time he goes back, she says, why are you prying into this? It doesn't serve anything. And Odo just straight right crosses her with, it serves the truth.
That's right, man.
And that's Odo from start to end, right? And there's a lot of story that goes along with, is he a separate being from his, people and all that sort of stuff. But for some reason, his character from now until the end of the show is just about like truth and justice is the way of this life, And
in a lot of cases, not just truth and justice, but truth and justice above anything else. Even in cases where maybe it would be better if a little bit less than full justice was applied here. Odo is for only the most and truest justice and the full truth and no half-truths.
Right.
So, but it clearly comes out that Curzon was a little more familiar with the wife, let's say.
Yep.
And then maybe was proper.
And the trial goes on. We figure that out. Cisco puts Jadzia on blast for not defending and saying, hey, this is what happened. But, she's trying to...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that during the course of this, the son of the general or whatever, like really clearly loves being a lawyer. He's just like, he loves doing the like asking an innocent question thing. And, oh, is this true, doctor, that this is how this goes? Oh, wow. Interesting. Gotcha question time. Like a lawyer thing that happens on TV all the time. He clearly loves it.
I mean, they love to put Starfleet captains in that position too, right? Of like, you know, he had Cisco had his gotcha moment too of like, hey, when he's talking to the Trill, you know, are you the same person? No, not really. Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so there's a lot of that, but it's not the strongest part of the show, which is why we're blasting through this part of it.
I mean, it's most of the episode though. So
I know, but like the physical lines are sometimes not the best.
Oh yeah, it's you know, courtroom stuff.
I mean, they make their point very quickly, and they have to do the drama of like, okay, but how did they get out of this? You know,
right?
And then you know, it comes through. The truth must win out. So the wife, the general's wife, comes to the station with Odo and saves the day.
This is not necessary because I know where Curzon was. He was in my bed. Dun dun dun.
And then we find out later from a conversation between her and Jadzia.
The son is super pissed about it, and then she's talking with Jadzia and says the dumbest thing.
What does she say?
No, it's just the situation is dumb.
Go
ahead.
It sounded like to me the general was trying to defect to the rebels.
That is, I guess, the way they word it is that he sold himself out to the rebels, basically.
I think
like the general is the one who sent the transmission.
I think what he was trying to do is defect, and then the rebels just straight up killed him.
Yeah, the way they word it is like he sold himself to the rebels, and then they killed him for it.
My guess is that maybe he found out about Curzon, and then was like, "Well, screw it, I'm gonna join up with the rebels then."
Yeah, maybe
instead of confronting his friend. I don't. It's kind of ambiguous, and
they don't really talk about that part.
Man, though, at the end of this
the wife is like, and now the secret is sealed. No one will know that he was the coward and I was the one sleeping around. Although people will certainly find out.
Oh, the end of this episode pulls at your heartstrings because you know what happens later. Spoilers for Deep Space Nine. If you don't want to hear, skip 40 seconds ahead. But she says to Jadzia, she says, live a long and fruitful life.
I wrote that, God, this is super cheesy but sad.
It's cheesy then because you're like, oh, okay, yeah, live a long and fruitful. Oh my God, she gets blasted in the middle of this show.
Well, I don't know, not the middle, near the end. But anyway,
Ezri's like later on, right?
Yeah, she's only like the last season or something. Anyway, it is in true cheesy Star Trek fashion, right? The wife still loves Dax, but like didn't know at the outset of this.
Oh, that's right. She didn't know that Curzon was dead.
Right.
Which is why she ends up showing up to save Jadzia.
Right. And you know so clearly she still loves Dax or has fond memories of their time together or whatever. And then is like, you know, you need to live. Oh. Very cheesy, but also, you know, it's good.
It's good.
It is the Star Trek. It's the Star Trek ending, you know.
Yeah, it's good because, you know, it stops the trial, which means we don't get an answer. Right, we don't get a forced answer. You might come up with your own answer, but anyway,
I think I think that based on the way they have laid it out, there kind of isn't an answer here, or at least in terms of is there in Odo's truth, you know.
Yeah.
Is there an answer to this question? Is a Trill separate from the thing? No, right? They're combined. But then the question is, can you punish the second combined person for something that happened with the first combined person? And that's like all gray area.
There's a lot of it, right? There's a lot of gray areas that get brought up here. One is kind of what you're talking about. And the only analogy I can come up with for that is like, think of a corporation or something that made mistakes in the past. Like the people that put asbestos in stuff, or the Johnson & Johnson people when they put unknowingly sometimes put a bad thing in a product, right? And 25 years later, no one that worked there at the time is still there, but then they figure out that it was a bad thing that company did, right? It has institutional memory. There are paper trails. There might be in the future emails or recorded calls, or like they would be able to repiece what happened if something were to go wrong in one of these types of companies. But it doesn't mean the people that weren't born yet that then work there when they figure this kind of thing out are responsible for it, right? That's the only analogy you can come up with.
I think in your analogy, unfortunately, the corporation is absolutely liable, and those people working there are going to be the ones that suffer because the corporation is still liable in that regard.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it should be, but what happens when those people get laid off because the corporation goes, you know what I mean? So this is the type of analogy that
anyway, it is there isn't really like a good perfect analogy for this case, right?
There's not,
and because we don't have this concept, but like the thought experiment of the concept is interesting.
It opens up a lot of other thought experiments too, which is what I really like about it. Like, what does it mean to know your like past life or past self, or what could it mean really to like know your mistakes forever, right? Like, yeah. Let's say you made like the tiniest of math errors or something like that when you were in high school and it cost you a grade. Okay, most of us forget that kind of thing, right? But like, what if that just what if all those tiny little mistakes stuck with you forever throughout your whole life and built up on you? What would it mean for you as a person? How different would you be? And that's kind of like, you know, Dax is 200 years old and you're putting them into a 20-year-old body, and those people have to like cope with 200 years of memories, good and bad. Mm-hmm. Like, what does that mean?
You know, and they don't get into what that means necessarily here. There are other episodes in the series where we learn about like what is Jedzia. You learn some about Jedzia, the entity separate from Dax. In this, you learn, you know, she's very smart and there's a Trill candidate program and all this stuff. But Dax and the memories of like what it means to have all this collective memory and stuff, they get into that more in other episodes in the show. And it's a thing that on goes, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a like a recurring thing. And you know, I think Trills aren't infinitely lived, but they are very long lived. And so you get some amount of like, this Trill symbiote has been alive for 300, 400 years or whatever. And therefore is like, you know, you get a very different perspective on life because of how much time has passed, right? That all of a sudden the Trill doesn't think about, oh, like I'm just in this host now or whatever for these 70 years. It's not that interesting compared with this is literally Jadzia's whole life, you know?
Yeah. Don't we come up with another Trill symbiote later on in the show that, or maybe I'm thinking of a different show. You know what? I'm probably thinking of another show that does this is Stargate. Later on, you get into the rebel version of those symbiotes that take people over. I don't remember if you remember that show very well.
I don't remember it very well. Although I know the actor that plays Odo, Rene Auberjonois. Auberjonois? Anyway.
Auberjonois, I think.
Auberjonois
or Auberjonois.
Anyway, the actor that plays Odo was also in Stargate 1, SG-1. And
that's true.
He was. I remember that.
That's true. Oh, who did he play in that?
Shoot, you shouldn't have asked me.
The Tok'ra is what I'm thinking of. So that like guy.
He played that guy.
Yeah, he played that guy. No, the Tok'ra are like the rebel faction of the bad guys, the Goa'uld.
Right.
And they have the kind of the same thing going on where they're the same as like Dax, right? They have institutional memory because these Tok'ra jump from person to person, and they kind of have this same thing where they put somebody on trial. But they actually in that show kind of deal with like, hey, what happens when like it jumps into a new host and then gets sick and senile, and then the host is paying for the past mistakes of the as they. It's interesting. It's a cool trope between both shows, I think.
Yeah, SG-1 also a good show.
Oh man, we could do another sub-pod on SG-1.
Nah.
Okay.
I like that show, but I don't enjoy rewatching that show as much as I enjoy watching Star Trek. So
I think that much more than Star Trek, I can have it on and not think about it. If I watch,
sure.
If I try to watch Star Trek while I'm like cleaning my office or trying to do paperwork or something, I inevitably get sucked in. Even if it's the same episode I've watched 50 times.
Yeah.
I get sucked into watching it. Unlike the SG-1 where I'm like, yeah, okay, they're going to another planet where they're doing another thing.
Yeah, okay. Fair.
I wouldn't say it's on the top of my list, though, of things to grab. Anyway, back to Star Trek. I think this is a cool episode for a lot of that headspace of Star Trek giving you something to think about. And I get my analogy doesn't work quite well with the corporation thing because under our law, of course, they're responsible, right? Like,
right.
The corporation has...
corporation is a person. You can still punish it.
Right, true, yeah. God. Oh, man. What would Captain Picard do? What would Captain Picard do if you told him a corporation was a person?
Would he tell you that the line must be drawn here? Anyway,
I think I think it's an interesting analogy in terms of like what happens to the people at a corporation and how do they get punished if that happens, but it definitely doesn't fly because they're obviously responsible. But
right.
I also love this episode because while Sisko is front and center in the trial portion of it, it also shows his. I think it's kind of. Tell me if I'm wrong based on the ones you watched, but like it's the first Sisko Pitbull moment where he has a hold of something and he won't let it go. Where he's not going to stop helping Jadzia despite what she wants, which is to just like, just let me go with them. I'll go get punished. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And he's like, no, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to find out what's going on. You're going to help me, save yourself. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the first, because again, there were a few I didn't watch, but it's definitely something that recurs in the show where Sisko gets an idea and he won't let it go, even, in some cases to his own detriment.
Definitely.
As the season goes on, or as the show goes on. But it's a very interesting change in his character from the very beginning. You see a little bit in the very first episode where when Sisko shows up, to DS9, you definitely hear, he's there. He's like, okay, I didn't know that I really wanted this post here with my son, and this is kind of weird. And the station is kind of unusual. It's not what Jake and I were looking for. He even tells Picard, who is in the first couple episodes.
That's right. Oh, man.
He even tells him, well, maybe you should find someone else to do this. I might even resign my commission. I'm not sure that I want to stay in Starfleet anymore. He's pretty disillusioned after all the stuff that happened with his wife. And she died in Wharf 359 and all that stuff. And Picard's like, oh, okay, I understand. We can start looking for another candidate and figure out someone else to run this station. And then by the end of that episode, he's like, actually, I'm absolutely staying here. All this stuff with the wormhole and the aliens in there has changed me. I'm going to do this. I love Bajor now. And, so you got like a little arc over those couple episodes. But this is kind of expanding the arc of like, I love dealing with all this space station minutia, which is literally going to be the rest of the show.
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, this is like, we're going to have an extradition hearing. I love this. Like, let's go. That kind of stuff. So, and, this is obviously Dax is his good friend from a long time ago. So he cares very deeply about making sure that these people don't randomly take her and execute her or him. I don't know. Is Dax a he? Is that?
Dax doesn't have a gender.
That's what I thought. Okay, I was trying to figure out what to refer. I guess it.
Yeah.
What to refer to Dax as? Yeah.
Them.
Yeah, maybe it's maybe
them instead of an it.
One.
I guess because it's a sentient being.
Still a person. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to call it an it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
Z.
Yeah. So anyway, Dax is clearly a great friend of Sisko's, and he doesn't want to abandon them. Even though Dax itself says, I don't want to do this. Just leave it alone, Benjamin. Like, let me go.
Yeah. I guess because he's Dax's superior, he has the ability to say no, you don't get what you want to do. But there's a little bit of, if he's not pretending, but if he's acting as some sort of counsel, like Starfleet captains seem to sometimes do, in multiple of these shows, it's interesting that he gets to ignore, quote unquote, his client and their wishes, which, she clearly doesn't want his help. I guess you get around that by saying, well, he's her superior, so she doesn't get a choice.
Yeah,
but I guess that's a little bit of a.
There isn't really anything
that wouldn't fly.
Right. Well, yeah. Obviously, if Dax had their way, they would just fire Sisko and say, "All right, take me. Let's go. We don't need this hearing."
Sure.
But I guess when the commander of the station says this is what we're going to do, everyone kind of falls in line because he's in charge.
Yeah. Well, at least he didn't just become a dictator about it and say, no, you can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gave him a trial. Man, I had forgotten that his wife... I'm sorry, I've been thinking about this since you said it. I'd forgotten his wife died at Wolf 359.
Yep.
How does he talk to Picard then?
It's super awkward. He's not happy about it.
Yeah,
he tells him straight up. He's like, "Oh, it's good to see you again." And he's like, Picard's like, "Have we met?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I was at Wolf 359." And then Picard's like, "Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I'm sorry."
Weird.
Yeah, it is super awkward. And it's less awkward, after he beats him later in the show. But it was definitely one of those, like, man, wow, dude.
Yeah. That's a heavy moment. That's heavier than I thought. I couldn't remember. I didn't remember that. Wow.
Yeah. We're talking more about Sisko here than Dax, but I think
that's an important episode for Sisko.
Sisko's the main character of the show, right? I mean, like Picard in TNG or Kirk in the original series, the captain ends up being the focal point of the show. Although, interestingly, at this point, he's a commander, not a captain.
That's true. Commander. When does he get promoted?
I don't know. It must be later in the show because he's eventually Captain Sisko when the Defiant comes around. So
maybe that's why he gets to be a captain.
I guess. Yeah. Weird. Interesting in that in Starfleet's rankings, a guy who controls an entire space station is lower in the hierarchy than a guy who has one small ship.
I think it was a stopgap thing. I don't think that he's...
No, they send him there specifically as...
Weird.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's weird, right? I think that's unusual.
It is odd. I mean, he's promoted... Season I don't know that 3. He gets promoted season 3.
Huh.
After he already has the Defiant.
Oh.
Weird.
That's weird. Well, hindsight is 2020.
Wow, weird. What a moment where they're like, they got to season 3 and they're like, we should probably make him a captain.
Yeah, it's weird that he's like lower ranked than the other people.
Yeah.
Also the main characters shows.
Huh.
Yeah. I'm sure that Avery Brooks would have some things to say about that if we could talk to him. If you're out there and you know any of the people in this show, send us their contact information. We want to talk to them.
I mean, we can make a phone call. I do know someone that wrote this show.
I mean, I would love to speak with anyone related to this show.
Let's see if we can make that happen. Just teaser.
Don't lean on anyone. That's rude. But
okay.
it is I think you and I both agree that we both really like Deep Space Nine. And that's why we wanted to do an episode like this, where we're just kind of like, hey, here's the setup, here's these people. This is a fun story. I feel like maybe in the wider Star Trek universe, this show is appreciated among the fans, but kind of gets crap among the wider populace for not being like the Next Generation 2 or whatever.
Well, it's not flashy. It doesn't have...
Certainly doesn't start flashy.
Yeah. It doesn't have characters that either reach out to certain people from the beginning, at least, right? Like, Janeway reaches out to a lot of people as a female captain and a strong female lead, and so a lot of people grab onto Voyager. Captain Picard has become an institution, and so if you tell somebody to watch Star Trek, they're going to watch The Next Generation.
Most likely, yeah.
Disco is now, grabbing people because of how flashy it is in terms of its art style and its direction and how action-packed it is. There's a lot of different avenues for entering Star Trek for people with particular tastes. And like, hey, do you like space drama that just doesn't go anywhere for a while?
I think there's
you should watch a space station show that's not Babylon 5.
Yeah, man, Babylon 5 is all right.
I know it is, but like, how do you sell Deep Space Nine over Babylon 5, right?
Sure. I think there's an argument to be made that this show, Deep Space Nine now, is great, but there are a lot of episodes of it that are really not necessary to see.
Yeah, sure. You could make a list of this and cut it down to 4 seasons.
Almost certainly, yeah. Probably less if you really want to get into it. But I mean, how many seasons did this run? 6, 7? Something like that?
This? 7 seasons, I think.
So if it ran about 7 seasons, I think...
Shorter seasons towards the end,
Yeah, and you could easily take half of every season and toss it.
I don't know.
Maybe some of the end ones you need. It starts getting more linear, and you gotta watch all of them.
When does Worf join the show?
4 or 5, I want to guess.
No, it can't be that long.
It could be. He joins the show.
I like that I was on Wikipedia.
Canceled.
I was on Wikipedia, and I just typed in eng.wikipedia.org/wiki/Worf, and that's the right page. I love it. I love it.
The answer is Nine. He joins the show
Season
when
4,
TNG is canceled and Worf joins.
That's why he joined. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Man, Deep Space Nine. Yeah, I'd say, but from like season 4 on, you can't cut as much.
Yeah, probably starting in season 5 for sure. Once they get deep in the Dominion stuff, there's a lot that is less cuttable. And actually, there are some really great episodes later in the show. We might come back. There was talk about doing some more of these for this show in particular, DS9, and we probably will do that.
What's funny about it is the ones we talked about are also standalones.
The problem, okay.
You're saying we can cut the standalones, and yet we want to talk about the standalones.
The standalone ones are so a lot of the cases are like, there people make these lists. There's tons of lists of best Star Trek episodes, whatever. Several DS9 episodes show up on all of those lists, right? Of like all best ever Star Trek episodes, including original series, including all the other stuff that's happened. And a bunch of DS9 stuff shows up near the tops of those lists in some cases because there are some really great episodes in here, which obviously you would want someone to watch, although they may not be integral to the plot necessarily of DS9, although some of them are. So we'll get to it, and I'm sure we'll talk about what some of those are going forward, when we do another one of these.
I don't know if I agree with this Screen Rant list. That's not.
Dude, there's so many lists. You gotta take the lists in aggregate. I read through probably like 40 best 50 episode lists or whatever.
Wow, good for you.
There's a bunch of them. There are so many. I just scrolled down to the top 10s and looked and saw what was available in there.
Oh man, this one has an Enterprise episode. Awesome.
Yeah, there's a few that have Enterprise episodes in them.
I like the ones that always include Equinox, emissaries from DS9.
Yeah. Which one is Equinox?
That's the Voyager
is that
one with the dudes that
one?
like imprison an alien species to try and get home.
Okay, yeah.
That's a good one. That's probably that's Voyager at its best, probably.
Yeah, surprisingly, Voyager doesn't have as many of the like really strong. Not that because the writing is bad, but because the show overall doesn't lend itself to like really strong moments, because there's a constant through line of them trying to do stuff to move forward in their journey home.
Yeah.
That Voyager
they get bogged
is bad,
down in the
really.
middle of it in terms of like, what's life like on this sort of thing, and then you get into the Battlestar Galactica malaise.
Right, and that's kind of the issue. Whereas I think the original series, TNG, and DS9 all have a ton of really strong single episodes. The original series in particular, I think, ends up hogging a lot of things on those lists just because of how revolutionary it was at the time anyway.
Yeah.
You get stuff where like, oh, this is the episode where Kirk has an interracial kiss, or this is the episode where there was, they like, what does it mean to even be a human versus, being, tried for these alien crimes or whatever. All this, I forget what is the name of that episode? Damn.
Which one are you talking about?
It's like, is it Mirror Mirror or?
I mean, there's the most famous one is the one where they go back in time, the city on the edge of forever.
No, that's not the one I was thinking of. But yes, that one is very famous.
Falls in love with the woman. When Kirk falls in love with the woman in the past, but has to let that woman die and all that.
Right. Anyway, there's a ton of like super famous original series episodes, not just because they were revolutionary at the time, but also because the writing and stuff is very good. Double especially good for the 70s or 60s whenever they came out.
Yeah, I mean it's a.
And it was new at that
Speaking of
time.
City on the Edge of Forever, I think that's another DC Fontana.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty sure.
Good job, DC. That's some good stuff there.
Yes. Wrapping it back around to the beginning. But hey, as we've gotten completely off track here, completely on brand, this is it for 2019, I think.
Yeah.
Star Trek.
I think,
so,
Andrew, planning forward here a little bit, there's a big deal coming out soon.
in next month?
Picard, right? Doesn't it start pretty soon?
Yeah, man, it drops in January.
Man, we still have an entire second season of Discovery to watch at some point here.
I think what we should do here, I don't know how much of a break you have going on.
I don't know.
But the first episode airs for Picard after we would record for January. Because it's going to record in like January 23rd. Or it's going to pop January 23rd. So I think what we do here is either another one-off or split up season 2 of Disco. But I don't think that's... Because then we're going to have to talk about Picard in February, right?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, there will be like 3 or 4 episodes out at that point or something, probably.
Yeah. It's going to be hard not to talk about it before then.
Yeah.
Well,
we can talk about it.
We're going to sort through that. There will be an episode in January. And we'll figure out what it's going to be.
Yep.
And then
true
in
We
the
Were
new
Gamers
year
fashion, we'll do it live.
Yeah, we'll do it live. It's fine. In the new year, it'll be Discovery Season 2, Picard, and probably Discovery Season 3. I don't know when Lower Decks launches, but I don't know how we're going to keep up with all this Star Trek, man.
I don't know when Discovery Season 3 launches either. I don't think they've said.
End of the year, I think. Basically, their idea is to keep Star Trek rolling year-round, so you have to stay subscribed to CBS All Access year-round.
Got it.
Because I'm guessing their metrics are basically like CBS All Access is our Star Trek subscribers.
Certainly seems that way. I don't know much else that I ever go to that service for.
Right. Yeah. So,
well, if you would like to tell us where you can, what order we should do all this stuff in.
Yes. Yeah, we want to hear.
Please let us know. And that would be podcast@weweregamers.com. And we will certainly read that and take your suggestions. We are also on the internet at Twitter, and that's @weweregamers. We're also @weweregamers on Instagram and facebook.com/weweregamers. And also on YouTube. You can search for We Were Gamers on there, subscribe. These pods end up in a very handy playlist, which Andy will keep going, I assume.
I hope so. Is it not updated? I hope it's updated.
It probably is. I don't know.
I don't know.
No.
Oh, okay.
And so that you, the fine listener, can easily find these episodes and listen to just Star Trek if you want to listen to 15 or so hours of us talking about Star Trek.
More than 15, because each one of these is like an hour and a half, and then
some of them are very long.
Some of them are. I think one of them's at least 2 hours. Anyway, it's hard not to keep talking about Star Trek.
It is.
Maybe we should do the dreaded transporter episode we've been debating.
We could do that.
We could do that.
That's definitely a thing.